Okay, so we got a 2013 Lincoln MKS here. We're going to be replacing the crank sensor on here today. I just picked one up from AutoZone, and there's that number, if you can see that. Hopefully we got the right one. So we're just going to go ahead and get started here. Okay, so we got the hood up. I went ahead and put it on ramps. It's really not necessary, but I chalked the wheels. We're going to be basically attacking this from up here, and what we have to do is get down in here by this exhaust. I'll show you in just a second. We're going to start with removing this intake. There's a safety tab underneath. We're going to go ahead and push down on that, and we're going to get everything loose up here. Just pull those tabs. We're going to get this loose. We're going to pull this hose loose, and we're going to go ahead and get an 8mm and get that. Okay, up here at the front of the intake, we've got some 8s. Okay, with those bolts out, we can just give this a good strong pull up, and we can lift this entire airbox. Okay, I got the air box out of the way. We're going to lift this hose up and just kind of push it, get a strap a hold of it here, and pull it up out of the way. Okay, so we just strapped it, hooked it around this bar up here, and we've got it strapped up out of the way. Okay, so now we can get down here and see a little bit of something. It's not any easier to come from the bottom, so that's why we're doing it this way. We've got that studded 10mm. We got the 10mm right there below that on this little heat shield. I'm thinking those are the only two, I hope. So we're going to go ahead and start removing those. Okay, and I want to point out, you want to make absolutely sure that your vehicle is cooled off before you go to messing with this. You don't want to be burning yourself on anything, the exhaust, the coolant. So definitely make sure that it's cooled off. So there's that first bolt, and if I can get up here, I'm just taking the 10mm nut off of that. Let's see if it's, I may have one more. I'm trying to think if there's another one. Okay, so that is it. Okay, so that's all there is to that little heat shield. Okay, so this is where it's going to get really difficult to show you what's going on, but I'm going to try. But you got to see the wire that's running down here, and it kind of has a few clips that you can pry off, but there is a rubber boot. I don't think you can see there. It's almost impossible to show you. You can see that rubber boot, weather boot, that's going into the engine housing, like towards the transmission. So we have to first pry that out before we can get to our crank sensor, to get to the bolt that's holding our crank sensor. So very difficult without removing this exhaust here to show you this. Okay, so first thing, we slipped that protective boot out of there. Now we also got a bolt that's in there. And let's see if I can get it positioned, and no, I can't. It's just not gonna cooperate with me here. Okay, maybe you can see that. You see, we got that bolt right there. That is holding that sensor. Now, what I'm going to do, move that 10 millimeter. I believe it's a 10. And once we get that bolt, we'll just pull the whole wire and we'll disconnect it once it's out here. And then the same thing, putting it back in, we'll connect it, feed it back in there. I know I'm going to have more trouble getting it back in than taking it out here. Probably going to use a magnet so we're not dropping that bolt once we get it loose. Same for putting it back. And I said this here, if this is hot, and it's still slightly warm, but if it's hot, you're not going to be able to work on this. Okay, this wire right here that I thought was clipped has actually got a 13 that goes through that hole right there. I went ahead and took that loose, clear up some slack. Now this bolt that's down in this crank sensor threw me for a loop. It's actually a 7 millimeter, and I'm using just a little tiny micro ratchet in this this kind of a deep 7 millimeter to get in there at it, and that's what I've been reaching down in here. So I gave the wire some more slack to where I could work it. Now, where I'm going to have to be careful and get a magnet is getting this out. Last thing we want to do is drop this in there, and then we're going to have a nightmare. So I'm going to just continue taking it loose with this, and then I'm going to get a magnet over here and get it the rest of the way out. Okay, so after backing this off here, the bolt itself is actually staying attached to the sensor, which is good. So there we have it. Let's see, with the slack I can pull this up and out of here. So the replacement should look pretty close to this. Now we're going to push down right here, and we'll be able to pull that off. Sometimes those tabs, okay, and we'll be using a dab of medium Loctite on this when we put it back. Now the little washer goes on there, and it looks to me like the bolt fits nice and snug, just like it did the other one, so you won't have to worry about it trying to fall out in there. So you can see that these look almost identical. So like I said, very difficult to show you. I'm just gonna twist that down in there. Very difficult to show you really what's going on down in there, but you're going to have to reach down in there. You're going to have a little bit of a difficult time, and the only other alternative is taking that exhaust off, which is going to be a lot more work and possibly broken bolts in the cylinder head and everything else. So absolutely don't want to do that. So I'm going to fasten that on down there. Right, so we're going to take and some medium Loctite on there. There's really no confusion putting it back in, because we know that the bolt was like what would sort of be on the left side, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it. But we know where that was at, so we're just going to stick it right back in and connect it to that connector there first. And this connector is only going to go one way, just want to make sure that we got it going the right way there. Something's not wanting to lock. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and feed this back down here. I think that, and we'll just wait on our little rubber boot a second. Okay, so getting this back in is going to be a lot of trouble, just like I expected. I've done nothing but cut my fingers trying to get it into place. So we are going to go with what originally had planned in removing this exhaust here, and we're just going to have to deal with it. So the first thing we got to do is unhook this O2. We're going to get the 10mm bolts out of this heat shield, and then we'll get underneath and we'll disconnect that. So this is just ridiculous to even think about trying to get in there, but we'll get to it here. Okay, so you see we got the upper heat shield off here. Okay, now we're going to come underneath, and we've got to get these two 13s. We've got a bracket here as well that'll have to come loose, but we sprayed these down. Go ahead and get these loose. We'll get the bracket. We've got another O2 sensor right here to disconnect as well. Okay, as you can see, we got those two off. Don't be surprised if these don't break on you. Just spray them best you can. Hope for the best. We've got two over here. These are 15s, by the way. These over here are going to be 13s. So we're going to get over here as best we can using my extended ratchet. So we'll take those out, and that should free this up here. So then we'll work on the manifold itself, and we'll hope and pray that none of those break off. Okay, so you just got to use whatever you got to use to get into these places, because sometimes you have a lot of things in the way. Okay, so there's both of those out. This bracket should be loose, and this is loose, so we'll work up top. Okay, so we got this other O2 sensor loose, and I've sprayed those down with WD-40, and we're going to start working on these. Okay, so we got out 6 of these studded bolts or whatever. The whole thing came out. If they don't, you're going to have to take the stud out anyway, because you're not going to be able to probably slide this out too easy. But anyways, we got it loose. See our gaskets on there. It looks like we got to lift it up off that exhaust down there, and we hope we can slide it out somehow. So anyways, okay, so with this moved over, I can get in here a lot easier. Obviously, I can't get the exhaust completely out of the way. It just won't allow me. Enough room to pull it out, but you see I can get in there now. So we're going to go ahead and just work on getting that snug back down. Okay, I want to just show you see, it's only going to go a certain way there, as you can see. So if you don't get it oriented just like that, it's not going to kind of sit down in a place. So I've got it started there. See if we can got the bolt started by hand, and we're just going to go about snugging it down here. Okay, and while we're at this, we're going to go ahead and slip this back into place. So slip it over the wire and pop it in there. Okay, now we're just going to work on getting our exhaust manifold back in place. We got our gasket, we'll slip that on. And we'll probably put a little anti-seize on these studs. Okay, so we're just making sure we got the gasket here lined up, bolts properly on each end, and we're just getting these started in there. Okay, so I know it's going to get dark on me, but I'm going to try to torque these to 25 each, starting in the middle, working my way out. We're going to get the O2, this heat shield back on. Just way more than I had planned on originally, but coming out of that, the sensor was no problem. Getting it back in was impossible. Okay, we got our heat shield back on there. Just getting ready to connect. And we also got this connector for the O2. Now, still have not connected the bottom or tightened the bottom. Okay. Okay, now we had this little 13 that holds the wire. I'm going to go ahead and get that in, and then we'll get our shield back on this part. Okay, now we'll get the shield here in place. It's got the stud that goes up on the top, and we got our bolt down on the bottom there. Okay, so we got to get these 15 millimeters back on here, and do yourself a favor, put some anti-seize on these. I'm really completely surprised that these didn't snap. It took a lot of force to get them loose, and if they snap, you have to drill it out, drill the stud out, and put you a bolt approximately that size back in there. So I'm gonna torque these to about 35. Oh, another thing, make sure that your gasket's in place. Make sure that it didn't fall off. Okay, you'll note that this brace is kind of loose. I left it that way so it would be easier lining these up, and then I'll get up there with a ratchet, wrench or something, and snug up these bolts on the top there. It's not really a big deal. These I wouldn't go more than about 35 foot-pounds if you can get your torque wrench in there. Okay, so we got the brace all snugged down good and tight, and the top part there and the exhaust, so we're all finished up down here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just release this coolant hose here, and we'll go ahead and start working on putting the intake back in place. Put that back down where it goes here. It kind of cavitated on me a little bit there after it cooled off. Okay, so pretty simple from here. We just got to reset our air box. It just snaps back down in here on these rubber grommets. Don't forget your connector here. Clip our hoses back on. Okay, then we'll just tighten up that band down there, and we'll get these two bolts right here. And if you don't have it set down on those grommets right, you won't be able to get these bolts to bolt down properly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and crank it up. And my flash is off here. The bad thing is we're going to have a lot of burn off because I had to get the exhaust off there and I sprayed it with a lot of spray lubricant. So it'll be smoking for a bit. Okay, so we've got it cranked up and running. Everything's sounding good here. We'll probably just take it down the road and test it out, make sure everything's going to be fine. But so far it's sounding real good. So that's going to do it for the video. It was a little bit more of an ordeal than what I expected, but we got it. And anyways, I hope you found it helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. As always, I invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.